and thanks for joining us on Choices Global, a production of First Assembly of God, Workmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. Women's health will be the topic of today's discussion, and as always, we have a great lineup of women joining us today. We have financial expert and ACCA fellows Siobhan Corbin, who lives in Geneva with her family, Dr. Kezia Lee, a physician for over 10 years, a wife and mother of two, LaShonda Kelman, a final year medical student at the University of Guyana, and Imani McKenzie, an optometrist, joining the conversation from Guyana. And yours truly, Celicia Pariag, in the US. Our goal today is to talk about women's health and to encourage our mothers, sisters, and daughters to be actively involved in their health care and needs. The Dutch philosopher Erasmus in the 1500s coined the phrase, and I quote, prevention is better than cure, which has become a part of modern global healthcare strategies. Using this phrase as the backdrop to our conversation, I would like to invite Dr. Kezia, Lashonda, and Imani to share their thoughts on the three main health issues affecting women today and how we can empower them to choose and receive the health care they need. And as we continue our conversation today, I want mothers, I want men and women, mothers and daughters, and girls to tune in with all of your senses because we're discussing you. You are important. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you, Alicia. Although there are a lot of issues affecting women today, I think cited as one of the top issues is heart disease or heart conditions. And I think it's not something we pay a lot of attention to. Also, at the top of the list are cancers, and these are reproductive cancers, cancers affecting the breast and the cervix of women. Another issue that's very important for us to touch on or to talk about is diabetes. And I'm sure the other ladies have a few other things that affect women's health, but these are some major concerns.
Um, Something that I would have recognized in recent times, with a lot of young women my age, and I see them sharing a lot on suffering with something we call PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. It is something that has been to the forefront for young women recently, and I see a lot of them sharing their journeys and a lot of other women relating to their. So I think it is one of the prominent health issues for young women currently, and it's something that we don't have much information on, and our parents and our grandparents never taught us about. So this is something new, and we're venturing off to learn so much about it currently.
The two previous speakers would have stated, when we think about health, it's not just limiting it to diseases of the body as well, but we also find that there's an increase in mental health concerns for women, as well as gender based violence, which is not just a sociological issue, but also takes into account a health issue as well. And so, with discussions like these, we hope that more persons will be more aware as to what can affect them and how they can prevent it or treat it as early as possible.
Thank you, ladies. And that's quite a lineup. When we think of the reproductive cancers, and then we think of diabetes that has spanned generations, and Imani introducing. But Imani, I want you as an optometrist. How can you, what can you tell us or tell women or encourage women, grown women as well as young women and girls about their eye health? How do we, in using the term prevention is better than cure, talk to us about eye health?
Thank you, Sister Celicia, for asking that question, because I say that that I want to encourage everyone or tell everyone that whatever affects our body affects our eyes. It shows up in our eyes. And I'm glad that Dr. Kizia mentioned diabetes because that has been something that is a big issue in the eye health currently, where diabetes has been leading to one of the number one cause blindness and
Mm.
vision loss. So we need to take care of our body because most of systemic diseases affects our eyes and affects the health of our eyes. So it is important for us to go to have regular eye examinations and eat healthy and so on, because these things come back to affect our eyes at the end.
Dr. Kezia, you mentioned diabetes, and I'm stemming off from what Imani just mentioned, the effect of it and the cause of blindness. Could you elaborate some more on preventative measures that women can take, especially from girls? I'm saying let us target our girls. Girls, teenagers, young adult. What are some of the preventative measures we can employ in our homes to curb or to treat with this disease?
Okay, thank you, Celicia, for the question. And I love the way Imani put it when she said most systemic diseases they have effects on the eyes as well. But it's not just they're called systemic diseases for a reason because they affect every every part that you can think of. For instance, diabetes. And diabetes, I know when we think diabetes, we think, oh, the sugar disease. And it's termed that way because it's a disease that affects how your body handles or processes the sugars that you put in. And when we talk about sugars, we're talking about hydrate intake. So that would include your drinks, the sweet drink, anything with sugars, your candies, your chocolates, the ice cream, but it also includes your starches, the rice, the potato, your pastas, right? So all of these are included. And diabetes affects how your body processes these sugars. Now, normally, what your body should do is break down the sugar, send it into the cell so that you can use it for energy. That's the normal process. But what happens in diabetes is that the sugars that are needed into the cell, they don't get in. They end up liming outside. They're around, but they're not useful to your body. And the increase in those levels outside of the cell where it's not supposed to be are what causes the effects of diabetes. And as I said, it's a systemic disease, and so it affects everything from the top to the bottom. So it can affect your brain. You can get a stroke. It can affect your eyes. It can affect your heart, your kidneys, your nervous system, and that's the name of few. So Felicia asked what we can do to prevent the effects of such a devastating disease. And being a pediatrician, of course, I'll start where my heart is. And so I'll start with the children and our girls, because we're focusing on women health, but also important for everyone is to note our diet. Our diet is so, so important. What we eat from birth to adulthood is very important. And one of the risk factors that causes children or later in life when they become adults to develop diabetes is what is given to them in infancy. Because, for instance, a newborn baby should only get milk, whether it be the breast milk or the formula milk, but that baby should only get milk. And we have a habit of giving infants, before they're ready to process it, we give them porridge. We say, "Oh, I'm gonna mix it thin. Let's give him some barley porridge. We need to fatten him. She's too thin. We need to fatten up the child." So we give them porridge, and the digestive system is not ready to process it, and that puts that infant, that child, at risk for later on developing something like diabetes. What's given to them? We add glucose to the feeds that we give the children, which is not a necessary addition. We don't need to give them that. If we introduce sugars early, then they are more likely to want to continue along that path. But if we introduce healthy foods at an early age, then we're setting the stage for them to have a healthy diet or for them to have a healthy pattern of eating. And of course, as Felicia said, prevention is better than cure. And it's a quote that we have been using forever. So in order for us to prevent these things, we need to start at the beginning. And the beginning stages, of course, are children, the infants.
Thank you, Dr. Kezia. And wow, I know in the Caribbean we think, oh, this baby gotta be fat, and so we want this child to. And it always bothered me because, and I don't want anyone to feel offended. It always bothered me that you want the child from infancy to 2 or 3 years old to be this heavy child, and then when they reach 5, 6, 7, and at 12, when they're now they cannot control themselves, you're too fat, you're too fat. And so you hear these things throughout, all the time. You hear, even in my family, my grandfather would come, God rest his soul, and he would see my sister, and she was a bit chubby growing up, and he's like, "Oh, you're too thin." And I'm like, seriously? But this is how we have been conditioned, that our infants and our babies need to have this chubby, and if they're not chubby, if they're not weighty, oh, they're suffering in some way. But that's such a critical point for us to know that you don't need to do that. They have, and the Lord has provided us with the breast milk that can sufficiently take care of our children. But I want to bring in Chevon at this point. What is critical, because the WHO has mentioned 6 priorities for women's health, and one of them dealt with gender-based violence. Chevon, I want you to talk to us. How can women, especially in the area of empowerment, how can we empower our girls and our young men, our young women, to not only understand gender-based violence, to identify it, and to be able to comfortably not accept that as part of their relationships? Could you talk to us a little bit about that? And then we're going to come back to you ladies.
Well, thanks, Alicia, and I'm enjoying the discourse with the other panelists. I think when we reflect on gender based violence at the intersection with women's health, it speaks to the value that we are failing to see in our women. And this is not just society, this is not just at the political realm, at the community realm, but also we as women, because I think, as you mentioned, the conditioning that has been passed on. So, what are some of the reflections we can have and that this program wants to pass on to our viewers, to policymakers, to our nation? Is that women are of value. You know, CNN in September of last year, they published an article that spoke about the world failing our women in the area of health. And they quoted statistics like about 1.5 billion women who did not have access to health care. They spoke of 1 in 8 women who have not had screenings of cancer, for cancer. And how does that link to gender based violence? Again, for me, it speaks to the value of women. The fact that women are the cornerstone of many of the families, even when we have our male counterparts. They say a woman spends about 80 cents in every dollar she earns on her family. And what that often translates to is her not spending it on herself for preventative health, for screenings, and so on. But when you bring in that other concept of gender based violence, you find that it pushes women further down in terms of their thinking of their value. When money is removed from the relationship, if they are depending on the male counterpart or a family member, then it means that economically we are also suppressing our women. And this is manifesting in our lack of access to healthcare. When women have to be the breadwinner for their families, oftentimes women have to become the caregivers. And this is what that CNN article alluded to. And so all of these, you could see how a multiplicity of issues, social, economic, and I wouldn't yet address the political or governance aspect, where even the decision making you find around health is often done by our male counterparts. And this is not to challenge existing governments, whether locally or internationally, but simply to raise an awareness around us as women that we have an opportunity to empower ourselves by one, being aware of our own value, two, being aware that we should invest in ourselves, meaning get information on prevention, find time to take a little bit of what we earn. And though our nurturing nature speaks to us taking care of our family, it's important for us to take care of ourselves first. And I think the third point I wanted to make is that when we talk about health, it speaks about discipline and a lifestyle. And so I'd want to stop there by saying whether it's dieting or whether it's setting the right nutrition journey from the age of a baby, as Dr. Kezia would have alluded, in terms of what do we introduce to a child in the first 6 months, or what do we as women do or use, or when we look at even generationally, we might find that our culture speaks to fried food and foods heavy in sugar. And so you could see how a multiplicity of issues are affecting us as women. But we have an opportunity through this program to raise awareness and to challenge our women to start to own their health and to empower themselves to ask the right questions, not only in their families as they save for their own screenings, breast cancer screenings, cervical cancer screenings with a pap smear, and so on, but also to empower themselves when they're in the doctor's chair, to challenge doctors and ask questions. But we can chat a little bit about that later.
Thank you, Siobhan. And that's a critical point. Challenging, asking the right questions in the doctor's office. Sometimes you go to the doctor's office and you feel intimidated because you're sitting in front of a male doctor and you may not have that freedom to speak. But today we want women, mothers, young women, we want you to leave this program feeling empowered that you must ask. It's your body. And you need to ask the questions. If there's something a treatment the doctor is offering, we want you to ask questions about that treatment. Lashonda, you mentioned, I want you to weigh in as well on the gender-based violence. This is a critical topic in Guyana and across the globe. But talk to us a little bit of young women. How do you see, and we're coming down to halfway of our time. How can you, as a young woman, speak to another young woman, encouraging them not to accept that as part of their relationships and lifestyle?
Based on what Sister Siobhan was speaking about, empowering women and as it relates to their health, it's important that we understand that you can ask questions. It's important that you know what your status is with regards to your health, and that includes everything. So you can ask questions, you can seek advice. It's important that you have a relationship with your physician so that if you have concerns, these can be addressed. You can equip yourself with knowledge. You can read, there are sites on the internet that you can access information, credible information concerning your body and your health status. It's also important that you get screening done as well. So this includes visiting your physician and subjecting yourself to tests so that you can know and you can be up to date on what your health status is. And this is important because it's not just about looking after the family, your husband, the children, your parents, but it's also looking after you. So you need to feel that you are also important. You need to prioritize your health because in order for you to take care of everyone else, you need to first take care of you.
To
Thank
young
you, Dr.
women,
Kezia. Mhm.
yes, for young women, I must say I can echo all of what Dr. Kizia said, but it is important that we know that we have a voice and we can ask questions and we have say in our treatment. We can ask for options when we visit the doctors and they tell us this is what we need to do. We can ask them what are the other options and we can say what we're best comfortable doing because there's no one option in treatment. So we have a voice and we can ask questions and we have a say in our treatment, what the options in our treatment, we have a say in what we want to do. So, and I think that it's what we need to know too is that we have a voice in policies that affect, or we should have a voice rather, in policies that affect women. We need to be a part of programs and policy planning that impact women's health. So I think that that is what needs to be done.
Well, Alicia, if I may, if I could join in, as we build on top of encouraging women to own their bodies, I want to share my own experience. And though I don't want us to emphasize the reproductive examples because I find that women's health tend to focus on that and not the broader perspective. One example was myself being pregnant at 37 years old with our third child and contemplating or feeling a bit pressured by society to have a normal delivery as opposed to a C-section. And having the conversations with my doctor, and he let me make the choice, and I think that was important as an experience in Europe, but it was a similar experience I would have had in Guyana with our first two boys. But in the end, I want to celebrate the fact that my husband, when we speak about gender based violence and our, how do I say, the peculiarities of us navigating gender in health. My husband empowered me in the sense of saying, Siobhan, you know your body. You make that decision or make that call prayerfully, of course. And I must celebrate my sister as well, who also encouraged me to say, this is your body, Siobhan, and you make the choice on whether it's a C section or a normal delivery. In the end, we decided on a C section, and the doctors, in their own wisdom, had not told us given us some information which may have made us anxious. But in the end, the umbilical cord had been wrapped around our little boy's neck. And so the medical advice would have been to go for a C-section. And I just wanted to share that pocket of an example where we might feel pressured as women sometimes because of society, because of family, because of norms. But in the end, we still have and should take that opportunity to make decisions on our health, of course, with some wisdom and taking, filtering the medical advice. The second point I wanted to leave with our viewers is that on the prevention element, taking, as Dr. Kezia said, screenings, we might see it as costly. But in the first world, where we reside in Europe, you can see that you must have a GP, you must have a general practitioner that you subscribe to, that you go for annual checks and so on. And both myself and family members have seen how they've been able to signal things very early so that we could get ahead of it and not have to deal with treatment.
Drawing from what the previous speakers would have said, it's important to know that one, it's your body. You would only know how you feel, and so Doctors, medical practitioners, they're only there to give you educated advice. Ultimately, it is you who will have to make the decision, and you're never too young to be aware of your own health. The these diseases that we would have discussed earlier, diabetes, even high blood pressure and heart diseases, if we take preventative measures early on in life, we will not end up on the hospital bed sick or having to take medication yearly, daily, just so that we could be fit enough to do our daily activities. So it's important to note that for the teenagers, the young adults, even the little children, let us identify as early as possible any issues within the family that they think might be passed on to them and take preventive measures. Regardless of what it is, diet and exercise are the two cornerstones in medicine. If you can have a healthy diet and you can at least exercise 30 minutes daily or at least 3 times per week for 1 hour, that could help prevent diabetes, high blood pressure. If you have diabetes and high blood pressure, it's not too late. It has been shown scientifically that diet and exercise would have not only de- made it easier for persons to control their blood pressure and sugar levels, but also in some cases help persons to reverse these conditions so that they would no longer need to take medication. So it's always important to know that health is a priority in our life. If we're not healthy, we cannot function, we cannot go to work, we cannot go to school, we cannot live up to our goals, dreams, and aspirations. So take that, go forth. If you need to go to the doctor at least once yearly for persons over the age of 50, or every 3 years for persons under the age of 50, get a physician, get a medics, whatever medical facility is near you, try and get that checkup done. Try and take your medication where needed. Eat healthy fruits, vegetables, exercise. It's very important.
Thank you, ladies. I know it's just we in our round table to do our closing remarks, but what an amazing set of information. And what came out today was taking recognizing this is your body and taking ownership of that. And I think many
Yeah.
women today, we have to, in spite of the cultural norms that we have been taught, we have a lot of information now at our fingertips that we can now take ownership. Dr. Kezia talked about doing the research. You may not understand all the terms, but if the doctor gives you a condition, you go check it out, you research it. And if you can't do it, find someone who can do it for you. And so, as we begin our wrap up today, Dr. Kezia, your final remarks before we go.
Thank you, Salisha. I can't stress enough the importance of screening. And when I say screening, I want to elaborate a little and say diseases like, and we mentioned it at the beginning, cancers. And some of these are preventable, some of these are easily treatable, some are even curable if we catch them early. So it's very, very important for you to recognize that visiting a physician at least once a year and asking, you can request the tests that are needed for screening. And asking for screening can go a long way towards preventing a horrible outcome. It's very important that you know where you stand and what can be done. Because the earlier these things are caught, the better it is for you and your family.
Thank you, Kezia. Siobhan, your final comments.
My comment would be to buttress what Dr. Kezia has said around celebrating prevention. I want to caution that what I see globally and in policy is that treatment is often proposed because that's where big pharma makes the money. Also, to do prevention, education, and all of that, which is more public health than just health, you find it's more expensive, and so economists would often advise policymakers to focus or that treatment is more cost effective. But if I may share another personal story on prevention, I recall working with a diplomatic organization in Guyana as a young woman at the age of 24. And one of their requirements was to have an annual screening. From that screening, I was able to see they actually were concerned about my heart rhythm, but they later ruled it abnormal as normal for me. That was important for me because that has come up as a question 10, 15 years later while I'm here in Europe. And so it was good that we had those tests from then for them to compare now. But what shocked me the most was that an entire medical at that time, I'm saying it was about 15, 20 years ago, that entire medical cost 20,000 Guyana dollars or 100 US dollars. Now it might be double at 40,000, but imagine the cost of that compared with surgery, which may be trending at 150,000 Guyana dollars, 200,000, and in US dollars, even though the translation may be linear at 1,000 US dollars, really in the first world, healthcare is much more expensive and even more difficult when your insurance is not the gold standard, for want of a better word. And so I want to encourage our viewers to inquire with your GPs, inquire if you don't have a GP, find one and invest that 40,000 or whatever it is to do the screenings that are needed, because your value, your life, your contributions, not only to your family but to ministry, since this program is done by a faith-based organization or church, is that our value and our purpose is enshrined in good health. So that would be my leavings with the audience.
Thank you so much, ladies. LaShonda made some critical comments. Diet and exercise, those are things that you can do immediately. Imani talked about eye health, Dr. Kizia screenings, and Siobhan talking about making the investment in yourselves, and you are valuable, and that's what we want to leave with each and every one of you, every woman listening to our voices today. You are valuable. You are critical to the overall workings of your family, your community, and the nation wherever you reside. And so it has been a pleasure being here with you on Choices Global. Remember, this is a production of First Assembly of God, Workmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. And we want to encourage you to join us on our website where you can learn a lot more, and join us again for our next episode of Choices Global. Bless you.